What are two things that interest the young people? Jazz and chess. Might as well do both at once. Now obviously, YouTube doesn't let just anyone show dicks on their site. Specifically, they want educational content and artistic expression. Since I spent a long time on the modeling and everything else with this, I really don't feel like getting this video taken down. So this is an educational video. Fully educational and artistic. So my plan was to make my basic chess piece just a generic dick, and for the king, queen, etc., I'll add some details on top. I'd make it more detailed, but unfortunately I'm not great in Blender. I mean, I'm making chess. Did you really think I was going to be good at Blender? I started by making the shaft here, which contains mainly the two corpora cavernosa, also known as the fleshy bit that makes up the shaft. The corpora cavernosa also fills with blood during an erection. It's basically like a sponge. Then I extruded these vertices a bit to model the urethra on the underside of the shaft, which carries urine and occasionally semen. The urethra is held open by the corpus spongiosum. And that's the shaft done. The next part of the model is the glans, or the tip of the piece. This is where the urethra exits. I decided to give my pawn the snip here just because I didn't feel like modeling the foreskin. Finally, I added a subdivision surface just to make everything nice and smooth, and also for the next step. If your penis looks like this, please see a doctor. Now I made the cock nice and veiny, because, you know, the glands and foreskin need blood. So these aren't very anatomically accurate veins, but like, come on, it's a fucking chess piece. The main veins are the dorsal veins, which transfer all the blood from basically the entire penis back towards your heart. Finally, I added an opening to the glands for all the stuff from the urethra to exit. I finished with the base of the piece, which I modeled after some generic chess pieces. I managed to crash Blender 3 times with my garbage vertex count management, somehow, but we got there in the end. Hey, that looks pretty nice. So the next step obviously is to make the king, queen, rook, bishop, and horse. Since I'm lazy, I just added some hats to the pieces and called it a day. Now in most sets, kings tend to have a cross on top of their head, so I decided to go with something similar. I guess you could call this Kingdom Come. For the queen, I did a crown, and I'll admit it's a bit rudimentary, but oh well. I'd already put way more hours into this than I think any sane person should. The rook is pretty simple. I went for this octagonal shape that I thought was pretty neat. The bishop hat I think already looks similar enough in shape to the tip, so I decided to just do a little surgery and cut a slit into the tip. The horse I spent multiple hours on. I wasn't quite sure how to emulate the knight as a piece. I thought about making the piece really long.
The giant horse.
But I think the height difference would have really thrown everything off. So I settled on giving it a mane of hair and some ears. My first attempts involved using Blender's realistic hair system, but after the 5th crash, I decided that my computer was protesting against this choice, and I went for a simpler design. The ears I sculpted looked a bit too much like cat ears, but close enough. And that's the entire chess set done. I couldn't resist not showing off this creation, so I added some materials to the pieces and animated a cinematic. Perhaps I went a bit overboard for the materials, but I was committed at this point. Now I wanted to 3D print a full chess set out of my models, obviously to play an actual game of chess. I printed in gold silk filament because that's pretty much all that I have right now. I threw my 3D models into Cura, which is a slicing program. Basically, it converts 3D models into instructions for 3D printers and lets you adjust things such as layer height, size of the print, materials, etc. However, I discovered that my mesh was predictably pretty messed up. For those of you who don't know, all that weird stuff in the inside of that model means that Cura is struggling to figure out where the outside of the mesh is. That's gonna be a problem. It didn't look like it at first, but there was a lot of internal geometry in my mesh, which is probably what was confusing Cura. I threw on a remesh modifier, which basically recalculates the entire mesh, and is a wonderful handicap for people like me. This made Cura quite happy, and I threw the print onto my Ender 3 for about 12 hours. I was happy with these print results, especially because my homemade supports seem to have worked pretty well. Such a nice sound. So here are the pieces a bit closer up. First are the pawns. It's nice that all the small details, especially the veins, have showed up on the print. The details are subtle as well, which I think is a good thing. The only issue is the seams on the back, so I'll have to adjust that as well. Bishop and knight, both quite nice. Good to see that this cutout printed without supports. Rook is also good, although I think the lower edge of the castle hat thing needs some refining. The queen's crown unfortunately seems to be pretty fragile, so I can hop into Blender and probably beef it up a bit. And finally, the king looks really nice, except I goofed a bit here and fused the supports onto the tip. But as for his crown on the top, I'm glad it stayed erect and didn't collapse, meaning that my supports will probably work once I fixed it. So that's it. This entire ordeal ended up taking around 10 or 20 hours. I kind of lost count in the middle. But if you enjoyed this type of stuff, please drop a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.